Yes, hello everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. Those who have checked the agenda for this session and who knows who is speaking and who knows the speaker may realize that I am not Ray Pointer. I'm just here to set a little bit the stage for what this discussion is going to talk about and to bring a little bit of context to this session. I work at SMR and I have been for the last couple of years being part of this response by SMR to the rise of AI, to provide an answer on how to look at it, how to effectively, in these two documents that I'm presenting here, how to effectively do a due diligence, vet suppliers of AI services in different ways, and eventually be able to make the right decision when you go out of these walls, then when you're approached by potentially tens or maybe even hundreds of suppliers, all of them promising to offer great tools, which they may very well do. In 2024, we published the 20 questions to help buyers of AI-based services. And recognizing some of the ramifications of AI this year, we have just published the 5 topics of discussion to help buyers of augmented synthetic data. Artificial intelligence is something that at SMR we have started, or we looked already into for quite a few years, and it is an integral part of our updated code of conduct. As such, the code of conduct that, by the way, we presented yesterday or 2 days ago in this very stage includes 2 definitions. They are intentionally broad to make sure that the code is actually fit for purpose, and that regardless of how AI eventually develops, that it covers the idea of it. The first one, artificial intelligence, is a set of technologies that are designed to simulate human intelligence and problem-solving capabilities. And within this, we also have a definition on synthetic data, which is information that has been created to replicate the characteristics of real-world data. More of it you can see in the ICC-SMR International Code of Conduct. Now, synthetic data, once again, is a broad term. So we can, in this document, in the 5 topics of discussion, we have identified 3 such types of synthetic data. Augmented synthetic data, which adds to primary data, creating additional values, right, added to the data set. Whole synthetic data, which is an entirely new data set, so basically a replica or another separate data set, and synthetic personas, which are digital representations mimicking real people. Recognizing that the questions that you may need to ask your potential supplier on each, to vet on each of these are different, this document covers the first one, augmented synthetic data, and we are working to create and to continue to cover whole synthetic data and synthetic personas. This document takes a sensible approach. First, we look at the project in case. What are you going to apply synthetic data to? Does it make sense to apply to it? It's worthwhile looking into that. Second, what are the system's capabilities? Is it, knowing the data set, is the system capable of dealing with it? Then, what methods does it use? There are many methods to choose from, and they all have their benefits and their drawbacks. It's important to understand that. The evaluation of the system, how can you evaluate, or first of all, how has the system been evaluated by the vendor? And second, how can you also analyze and evaluate it? And lastly, has there been used other additional data to train the model that I need to be aware of? It ends with some with compliance considerations, knowing that because of all the rise of artificial intelligence, there is a whole set of laws and legislations that we need to be aware of. So with this, we set a whole a project team, a set of experts. It was coordinated by, at the time, chair to SMR's Professional Standards Committee, Judith Passingham, and it counted with the invaluable expertise of John Poulston and Ray Pointer. Of course, it also counted with the Legal Affairs Committee at SMR, with the entire Professional Standards Committee at SMR, and with a set of experts. So we drew from several sources. Having said this, I will invite you to download these documents and the 20 questions. And what is next? Well, next is Ray, first of all. But in terms of what SMR is going to do, we are working on expanding this guideline to continue to include the other two types of synthetic data, as I just mentioned, and we will continue to work to guide the industry on proper practice. And we will be organizing community circles to understand how you view this area, how it can help, what we need to look into, and what other areas we should be providing a response to. So, just with this brief intro, Ray, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Xavier. A quick clarification. My voice is a bit out of whack. I've had a bad cold and flu for the last 2 or 3 days, which is why I've been wearing a mask previously. We're actually going to, this is all work in progress. None of us know exactly how this is going to turn out. I've done quite a few studies into synthetic data, and what I can tell you is you are in a minority. Every time I do a piece of research, there is no point of view that comes to 50%. So whatever you think about synthetic data, you are definitely in a minority. We are all in a minority. We're looking at changing what the next 2 pieces are going to be, because we did augmented data because it's fundamentally simpler and it is quite different. You have some normal data and you fill in some gaps and you add some rows and you add some columns, but it's all interpolation and it's basically statistical. There's very little magic involved in that. Once we move to the next 2 categories, there's a lot more magic involved. Magic was a phrase that Einstein used for any technology too complicated for you to understand, too complicated for me to understand. So we're going to break that in the next stage into synthetic agents. Agents are machines that make things, and in this case they are things that will make synthetic data sets, or they are things where you can have a conversation with the data. So you ask a question, get an answer back, ask a question, get an answer back. We have seen lots of examples of this already over the last 2 days. And then we have a synthetic data set. So what you can do is you can take a synthetic agent and you can generate a new synthetic data set. Anybody who saw Elaine Rodrigo's presentation yesterday morning will see that in action, where she took a process that took several weeks normally down to 6 hours. They used AI for the first 4 hours to generate concepts, refine concepts, and then they used synthetic data from bases to test it within that. And if we look at what is the fundamental driver of synthetic data, it's actually speed. Yes, price is very attractive. Yes, some new concepts are attractive, but it's fundamentally about speed, and that's what we're seeing going on. So I've been eliciting all these questions via social media, lots and lots of different ideas about what is going on, and we've been looking at those. And I've boiled it down to these essential things. What is SMR's role? Should we oppose synthetic data? Should we observe it? Or should we advance the development of it? I am still getting emails saying, Ray, we must try to stop this synthetic data before it takes off. Hey, that was last year. It took off last year. It's in massive use. Go around the exhibition, you'll see it all over the place. Our job is to ensure that it happens responsibly and safely and transparently. What else have we got to do? Yes, we need to define the terms. Lots of people hate the term synthetic data. We don't get to choose the language. This is all part of discourse. This is, if we go back to that first presentation today, look, we think about Foucault and about how language happens. Synthetic data is the phrase that's used. We're creating modeled projections, but we are stuck with that. But what are the best practices? How should we ensure that buyers know what they're buying? Should we regulate it or evaluate it? We would like to be in a position where we could say, that is banned, and that is good, and this is double star. I don't think we'll get to that position yet, but I think we do need to be a bit braver, in pointing at things and saying, you know what, that's a really flaky way of doing it, and you should be putting a bigger warning when you do it that way. And educate. We're going to be doing community circles. We're going to be pushing out as much information on this topic as we can. How should we evaluate synthetic data? This is a really big issue, and I'm really delighted to see John Paulson. John, just stand up for a minute, so everybody needs to know who you are. This is one of the most knowledgeable guys around in this field, and has done stacks and stacks of work. Nearly every paper you see that evaluates synthetic data compares means. Well, that's necessary but not sufficient, because actually a lot of the time you need the distribution to be the same. You need the statistical properties to be consistent. You need the correlations in that data. So we need better frameworks for evaluating how these things work. We need to look at the ethical safeguards. Synthetic data has got the potential to increase anonymity and protect privacy. It's also got the potential to reduce it. If we make a digital twin and we start asking your twin, show me some photographs of your street and things like this, then all of a sudden we know where you live. So there are some interesting issues. Validity, bias, inclusiveness. Not everybody is being interviewed. And we talk about trying to use synthetic data for excluded groups, but maybe we are going to simply amplify the small number of excluded group people we spoke to, rather than being inclusive. These are the sorts of challenges. And then we move on to the challenges. Where is the new data going to come from? If you build synthetic data from existing synthetic data, it's a process called cannibalization. It gets worse and worse. You can get model collapse when you start to move in those directions. So we need always to think about where the new data is coming from. Who's going to pay for the new data? If everybody is using the cheap, quick stuff, where is the new stuff going to come from? We've got to think about the disruption. You know, this is going to have an impact on employment. This is going to have an impact on the structure of our industry, on profitability. And I had a fascinating discussion yesterday with a major, super bright client-side person. I'm saying that because they might recognize themselves in the audience. We've got to go away from charging for projects. You know, if we talk about a concept test, you don't want to pay $1,000 for a concept test. Under this new model, you really want to be charging by tokens. We want the price per use to be really low, and we want the use to be massive. That is the AI method of operating. Price per token low, usage massive within that. And that is really going to cause a massive disruption in how we do that. And we also have this issue about homogeneity. One of the strengths of most synthetic data is it fills in the distribution. So we have a normal distribution, the new stuff comes in and it fits in there. And that's good for lots and lots of projects. It's not so good for creativity, it's not so good for segmentation, because it's filling in the gaps where they ought not to be filled in. So we've got some work to do there. So that's what we're doing, but we have microphones, we have 11 minutes left. Who has a question about synthetic data? I think I can answer almost any question. Come on, Alain.
Nothing in particular.
Okay, so, okay, the microphone is on its way.
So, Andrew Seinfeld from Bold Chat. I'm curious on your perception on whether we should be. I'm curious on your perception on whether we should be building the synthetic data on quantitative research, qualitative research, and your thoughts on the regression to the mean. Whenever I've seen people using synthetic data to boost a sample, any site of something that would be maybe interesting or an insight tends to regress to a mean. And I'm wondering, do we lose those insights that we could find by actually using human versus using synthetic? And how do you go about making sure you're not missing the insights by using synthetic data?
Okay, so good points. First of all, qual and quant. They are different, and most synthetic use at the moment that you see reported is about the quant stuff. For most purposes, I think the fact that it doesn't regress the mean, it regresses to the distribution. And that's actually a relatively healthy thing. We don't want to generate data that is outside, and it suppresses. Let's say we're doing a big survey of vodka drinkers, and we've got a couple of non-drinkers in there. We want their data to actually go down in impact when we do this process. But there are types of analysis where you do want that extra. And I would say one is brainstorming new concepts, where we're looking for outliers. Another one is segmentation, where actually the spaces in the distribution are really vital. So there are times when you're going to want to change the way you generate that data. So you want to allow it to be clumpy. That is something we can do. Let's move to qualitative. Then it's much more around the discussions. And I love one of the things that Bolt Chat does, where you create a persona out of some people who are similar in your data collection exercise, and they can then articulate a view representing a group. That, I think, is something we're going to see a lot more of, and I think that's really good. Please go and visit the Bolt Chat's stand out in the exhibition. Any other questions? Over here, microphone, please. Or over there, microphone. Hi, Lester.
Hi, Ray. Good morning. Hi, I'm from Bolchat AI.
I know you
Lester. Sorry. I believe that the future of data is unstructured. So there might be a point in time wherein the synthetic data can interact with human data, and that's what we're trying to do at Bolchat AI. I think probably the question should not be about regulation, but probably more on the validation. So it's just a thought that as an industry, we should be opening up to, how we make use of the validation, or how we think about validations rather than the regulation at this point. And it's just a thought more than a question.
Yeah, so just to build on that, something that John and I have been talking about is that in these community circles, we may well say, the next one is going to be looking at this. Who has got some case studies? Who is willing to do this? Or we may pose some questions to say, here are 3 issues about validation. What are your answers? Please come along to the community circle, share your answers. I think that if we do that, we can be part of the industry that owns the use of AI. I thought it was really fascinating, again, looking at what Elaine Rodrigo was saying, and I know that other organizations are doing this. Insight teams are driving AI in a lot of brands. And if we keep pushing hard and keep exploring the boundaries and keep sharing the stuff we should share. We know that some stuff's going to be secret, but there's other stuff that we can share so we can move forward in a safer, faster way. Next question. I'm governed by the microphones arriving with people.
Hi, Ray. This is yours of IC. I was wondering, do you have any advice for buyers in terms of how to go about the legal aspects like confidentiality? And I see today as typically a struggle. For a pilot, it goes typically easy to experiment with a new AI approach. When you want to scale it, it becomes a bit more complicated. For example, to aggregate across human-tested studies and then translate that into a predictive model, a lot of the legal folks would be, are we sure we want to do this? All the risks involved. So any learnings there that you see, or some leadership?
Yeah, so in the guidelines we've already published is quite a bit on that, so I'd urge you to download the 20 questions, but also the stuff about synthetic data. Talk to the people who are already doing it. So Heineken I would mention, Reckitt's I would mention. There are plenty of others who are doing stuff in this zone. A lot of this is going to have to be client-side. So the stuff that joins it all together is not going to be on an agency computer. It's going to be on a client-side system, and it's going to pull this information in. Personally, I think we're going to see an enormous role for edge computing, where people are going to download an open source or an open weights model onto their internal servers, so it is not part of the internet. And this is very much a growth area. It's a very competitive area because most of the good open source models come from China, and that is quite an interesting thing to be handling. But I think that is where it is there, but you're going to have to be brave. If you are safe, you will be too slow. If you are too risky, you will be destroyed. It's somewhere in between.
Ray, two quick questions. One is there any kind of advice that you have for the heterogeneity of the source data and hence the quantum based on the vectors so that we can scale it up to ensure that the entire heterogeneity is represented in the synthetic data? That's A. B, when as marketeers, when we have our first-party data with a bunch of attributes of the consumers, is there a minimum number or types that you suggest when we try to create synthetic personas using the first-party data?
So we'll tackle the two together separately. So heterogeneity is really important, but so is recognizing. So if we have online data from Mongolia, there are about 3 million people who live in Mongolia, there are about 2 million who use the internet, you are only ever going to represent the 2 million. Don't try to say we're representing the 3 million. So maximize the heterogeneity going in, but then name it. This represents these people. And we are missing these people, and so we're not claiming that we can model them. And this comes back to this point about the less represented groups, the normally excluded groups. There is a real risk that we will start representing the vocal minority within that group rather than that group per se. Sorry, just remind me again on the second one.
It's on the first-party data.
Oh, the first-party data. So one of the things that's fascinating is if you have a lot of data about one person, you can make a really good digital twin about that person. So digital twins is different from constructing personas from groups. And it's relatively straightforward to make a digital twin of one person if you have enough data. Once you have 1,000 of them, boy, does it cost a lot in AI usage at the moment, and it slows the whole process down. So it's how you want to use your first-party data. Do you want to create groups and then make a series of personas for each one of those where you could have an interaction with them? So you start to have a conversation. You say, oh, right, looks like we've got 20 types of consumers in our company. We will build an agent for each of these 20, and we can now have a language conversation. And in that data that's fed into it, there's going to be quantitative information and there's going to be qualitative information, which comes back to Lester's point. It's not going to matter whether that was qual and quant that it went into that building process. It's going to have both of those in there. We have time for one more question.
Hi, Ray. Ray over here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Aaron Reed from Sentient. Related to that question, I'd love to hear what you're hearing on perspectives of the concept of margin of error with synthetic boosted sample. And what are we creating a margin of error around?
Okay, the very worst things I'm seeing are where people are just applying normal statistics, and that is a combination of misinformed or deceitful, depending on who's doing it. You cannot use normal margin of error statistics on any synthetically generated data. On some types, what people are doing are randomized draws, Bayesian approaches to create that. I am not even sure that that is valid. I think I can see in some cases where it is, but in general, I think that we are moving outside of the area at the moment. We need new innovations in terms of margin of error, because if we are talking about digital twins answering a question that was not asked. So I've done some work, let's say Coca-Cola. I know what people think about strawberry flavored Coke, I know what they think about cherry flavored Coke, lime flavored Coke, and now I test guava. It's probably going to work, but I have no confidence. I can tell you how wobbly the data I generate is, but I can't tell you how that wobbliness relates to what would have happened if I asked the real people. So what I think people are generally telling you is how wobbly the estimates they are that are giving you, but that's not the same thing.
For an industry that has used statistical significance as the primary factor for convincing stakeholders of the validity of the results, what does this mean for how we need to argue around the validity of our insights?
We have put forward the arguments of statistical validity, and most of our clients have done it on face value. And I think that is probably where we're going to be. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.